Claire, are you finding that it's been really hard to be creative, or are you having pockets of creative outbursts right now?
I'm finding it's hard to be creative because for me, at least, and creativity requires replenishment and reflection. And when you live in an era of like one train wreck after another, and maybe a small reprieve and then another thing, and then, and being surrounded by just so much grief that, we're living in globally and especially in America, it's like finding replenishment is so difficult, and creating the space for reflection seems almost impossible, right? Because you still feel so in it. And then you're kind of, as you're in it, met with like, maybe one aspect of things ending or beginning, but, new uncertainties of whether it's the vaccine or whether it's, how they're going to distribute it in a non-chaotic way, or what about your kids? And it's so hard to create the space for, I feel, what's necessary to creativity in a time like this.
Yeah. How are you handling the grieving portion? Because I'm finding that every day there's a new thing to mourn. And also when you really focus on just, the grief of the moment, it becomes really overwhelming because there's just so much. There are so many small things, and then there are the big things, and then there are the things that make you spiral. How are you handling that?
As someone who, most of the reason why I write so many mantras and things is because I actually use them, like when I can't sleep or I have anxiety or I have, whatever I'm moving through, I do have things that I repeat over and over to myself. And I think when it comes to grief, what I've been, I have written on a sheet of paper, right, in probably 3 different rooms of my house right now is, the mantra, may I sit with grief without becoming it. And so for me, I just, I kind of live knowing that grief is something and is a ever present, not ever present, but grief is a kind of reoccurring visitor that is almost impersonal to you, like the way the same group of birds might kind of fly and sit by your house every day, or, and so I kind of try to know that I can sit with things without becoming the thing. And that really helps me when I feel that I'm kind of up to my neck in it.
You are like so in touch with your feelings to a degree that it like frightens me a little bit, because it just shows me how much I'm like, oh wow, I move through the world avoiding every feeling. It's how I'm able to take a breath, But I'm just like wondering, were you always like this? Like, is this something that you had to learn, or do you think that like truly from the time you were formed, you really knew that like, processing your feelings and like handling them and also naming them was really important?
I think it mostly starts with an ability to console yourself. I think that for me, my parents will be the first people to tell you that I raised myself, and I didn't grow up in a household with a ton of emotional or mental stability or emotional availability. And I think for me, especially, there wasn't a ton of emotional availability. Given that, my brother, the way my brother kind of handled the traumas of our childhood, he, really required a lot of the attention, not the attention, but, when you call out for the focus, you tend to get the focus more, because it's kind of like, you have to go see the principal, or you have to go to the class, you have to. And so when that's how it manifests in one child, that child where it doesn't manifest in that way kind of ends up being left alone the most, because all of this energy has been spent on, the child who is, flaring. So I think that for me, I just spent a lot of time in my own childhood by myself, kind of figuring out ways to make myself feel better that were, healthy. It's not like I even thought they should be healthy or not, but it was kind of like that made sense to me as a kid. And I remember even when I was writing my kids' book, I wanted to create the book, my book kind of consists of a series of questions that this traveler, this young traveler asks this road. And the road is kind of this, whether it's the universe or God or whatever it is, your internal wisdom, any type of belief you have, Buddha, whatever outside that, whatever kind of deep wisdom you think may exist in the world in some way, energetically or spiritually. The road is kind of responding and, holding the traveler as they go. And I remember when I wrote it, I was like, when I had all these big questions and, what did I wish I had the grownups around me? What did I wish the grownups around me were providing me the answers with, or two? And so I think that the one thing that I've learned to do since I was, 6 years old is like, okay, well, just if you look at it this way, or like, if you can just like have some water, or if you can go to sleep, or like, I really did have these kind of weird rituals, even as a young child, of like, okay, this is how you can cope with this or deal with this. And that kind of turned into adult habits that became like much better versions of like non-coping. So going to therapy, so you're not always coping, or having a supportive group of girlfriends, or finding a healthy relationship romantically, et cetera.